Hi everyone, my name is Andrea from Zaire Intuitive. Today we're going to look at the natal chart of President Donald Trump. I know some of you have been waiting for this for a little while, and here it is. But before we get started, I do want to do a little mini biography on him, like I do in all of my other videos. But this one's going to be really, really short because I know all of you already know who he is. In his early childhood and adolescence, he was raised in a very wealthy home in the Jamaica Estates neighborhood in New York City. His mother was an immigrant from Scotland, Mary Trump, and his father, Fred Trump, was already making a name for himself in the real estate world in New York City. Trump was a millionaire by the time he was 8 years old. And then he was sent to Fordham University, I think, for bad behavior, of course. But he ended up dropping out. And then in his later younger life, he attended the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, and this is where he earned his Bachelor of Science in Economics. As we know, he was drafted during the Vietnam War. He claimed he had bone spurs, and that's how he got out of that. And then in his young adulthood, he became a very successful and very rich businessman in real estate. And he started with by working in his father's business in Trump management, and his father made him president, and then he inherited all that after his father died. He became acquainted with a lawyer named Roy Cohn. And if you guys don't know who he is, I urge you to watch some YouTube videos of him because he represented a lot of mobsters back in the time of the mafia. And he was also a fixer, and he was Donald Trump's mentor. And it is said that he was the one that taught Donald Trump how to have this strategy of turning losses into making them appear like they're wins, even if they were still losses. And you can see he still does that today. He filed for bankruptcy for many failed businesses. He defaulted in over $3 million in bank loans. And as we know, he wrote all of those off. And then he had two divorces from Ivanka Trump and Marla Maples. There was kids from those two marriages, and then he married a third time to Melania Trump. And we know he had many, many affairs during this time. As I remember, it was all in the tabloids. Um, a lot of you know that he hosted his reality TV show, The Apprentice. It was like a competition show, and that's how he became really famous, even though he was famous already. Around this time, he became associated with Jeffrey Epstein. We all know who he is. And he purchased Mar-a-Lago, the mansion here that's in Florida. And then he acquired the Miss USA and Miss Teen USA pageant universe. And he co-founded Trump University. As we know, that was the big thing in the news. He defrauded many customers with that, and that business ended up failing as well. He was charged with tax evasion and charity donor violations in accordance with his charitable foundation, Trump Foundation. And he had many failed casinos and more bankruptcies around this time. And I remember he had political aspirations when he was very young. I know he talked about it in interviews, but I didn't ever think he was serious. But then in his later years, he did join the independent and Democratic parties, and he campaigned for president for that. But of course, he failed. He didn't have any success there. And then I remember he joined the Republican Party to see if he would have success there, and he did. And of course, he became US president for the first time in 2017. And this was during the COVID era, and he lost the 2020 election after those 4 years against Joe Biden. And then he claimed the election was stolen. And then the January 6th riots happened on the Capitol. And then we have where he stole classified documents and stored them at Mar-a-Lago and the FBI raid and all of that. And then this really shocks me because I'm still shocked even to this day. And I know people were disappointed in the Biden presidency and the economy and all that. I get that, but I still don't understand how Trump became president again in 2025. And I'm not going to go into anything after that because we all know what's happened so far. And it doesn't really correlate with anything that I'm going to point out in his chart. So just, I kind of want to concentrate on that biography that I just gave because there's certain things that I'll be looking for in his chart. So, lack of love in his childhood, I'll be looking for that. Troubles with love and relationships, things involving his career and money issues, things involving his business and any partnerships that he may have had. I'm looking for a dual personality type, maybe even a multiple personality type, and then some narcissistic qualities, and then things associated with a total lunar eclipse because he was born during one. And as we know, these kind of eclipses are always going to be a full moon. And in astrology, full moons have a lot of significant meaning. So we're going to go into that. So when I look at this chart, there's some things that I'm going to be pointing out on this chart, and these are the significant things that I found. So he was born under a lunar eclipse that has some really great significance in astrology, and I'll explain that here in just a second. He also has a bowl-shaped chart, okay? Um, and I'll explain what that means. The sun is the center of his chart. He also has a Pluto alignment, a very significant Pluto alignment, and he has an interception with Gemini and Capricorn. He also has a multi-planet opposition, and he has some empty houses dealing with love and partnerships. All right, so we're going to start with his sun. Actually, before we start with his sun, I just want to go over some of his stats. He was born June 14th, 1946 in New York, New York. His sun sign is Gemini, his ascendant sign is Leo, and his moon sign is Sagittarius. And these three things are like the most significant things in his chart. Like I was saying, he was born under a full moon. Okay, and I'll explain what that means here. So when you're born under a lunar eclipse, this usually means that you're going to play some significant role, not just in your own life, like to a whole generation of people. It can also mean that these people are the bringers of chaos and change, as we know that Donald Trump is. So just keep that in mind. All right, so let's look at his sun. Actually, this is his chart. You can see that all his planets are right there on the left-hand side. They create a bowl, and these empty houses on the right, which have no planets, that's because these planets carry the weight of, if there were planets on that side, these planets would carry the weight of those empty houses. All right, so let's talk about his sun. The sun is the center of his chart of course it is. This is Donald Trump we're talking about. And it's at 22 degrees. It's very, very strong. The sun is about the self. This is about your core personality. It's in Gemini. Gemini is highly sociable. They're very communicative. Dare I say they're highly intelligent as well, being an air sign. I mean, that's argumentative. Gemini is also very mutable. They have a lot to do with dual personalities. I'll go more into that. It has to do with doing more than one thing in life. We know that Donald Trump was a businessman. He was also a real estate person, and he was a politician, and sometimes all of those things at once. So Geminis are very highly adaptable. But the argument here in his chart with the dual personality is that his ascendant sign is in Leo, okay? Leo right here. It's a very strong Leo with the ascendant at 29 degrees. This means it is important on his chart to show how others see him here. Leos seek the spotlight. They love drama, and they're also natural leaders. Leo's a fixed fire sign, so when Leos do things, they do it with gusto, but they're fixed in their ways. Once they get into a rut, they don't want to get out of it. Okay. It's in the 10th house, which has to do with his career and public life. That's where his sun is actually. It sits in the midheaven portion of his chart, which also has to do with career and public life. So we can see that in his chart, his career and public life is the focus there. All of these planets right here are in the midheaven houses, okay? So his core personality and his public life are linked. They're conjunct with the North Node and Uranus, which blend their energies together. So conjunct means that these planets are just so close together that their energies sort of meld together. They work together. The North Node is very strong at 20 degrees. This has to do with one's life path. It suggests a path chosen before we got to Earth or why we are brought here, okay? So Trump's path forward suggests a highly publicized career being there in the midheaven and the 10th house. Uranus here suggests some rebellion and very unusual nature. It can also be about chaos. We're going to look at his opposition here, okay? The Sun, the North Node, and Uranus are opposing his moon here, okay? So the moon is opposite Uranus. Uranus has to do with innovation, change, and unpredictability, and we can see that it's opposing that emotional, intuitive lens that the moon brings. What I want to explain about Uranus is that it is a generational planet. So anybody that was born in 1946 or around those years are also affected by the same social change that everybody else is. So during that time, it was the end of World War II. We were just coming out of that war, and we entered a new informational age. So we started seeing during that war that newscasters were going in for the first time while the war battles were going on around them. We also saw the advent of media and television as well. This was the communication era. And it was also the very beginning of the Cold War era as well. So that was between Russia and the United States. So we see a lot of this in Trump's path forward here in the North Node. He's carried these ideas with him throughout his life and carried them through his political career as well. You see the themes going on here? I mean, we haven't even looked at the other planets, and we can already see how this is forming. Okay, so opposing the moon and the south node in Sagittarius here. The moon is at 21 degrees. It's very strong. It has to do with emotions. It has to do with inner self. It has to do with intuition, okay? So also, the moon has to do with the mother, and we know that Donald Trump's mother had a huge influence in his life. It also resides in the fourth house, which also has to do with family influence and roots. So we can assume that his mother and his father, we'll get into his father a little bit later here, had a very heavy influence in his life. He said in some of his interviews that his mother taught him the value of hard work, family, and community. And Sagittarius there has a lot to do with developing the higher self. It has to do with higher learning. So we know that his mother, she volunteered a lot. She was religious. That's Sagittarius. She came from an immigrant background. That's Sagittarius, okay? It's conjunct with the south node. It's the opposite of the north node. This has to do with talent, skills, and abilities that we might bring from a former life or that we learned from our early life and carried on into our later life. These are linked to the attributes of his mother, okay? So I see this as the person that he could have been, okay? And I'll explain this here in just a few seconds. It has a lot to do with his opposition, this focus on his career, and these two sides, they oppose each other. So that tells me that there's probably these two sides of him. There's the moon side, and then there's the Gemini and Leo side as well. So it gives him a very mercurial personality that switches on and off like a light switch. All right. So that also means that he's very adaptable as a Gemini. Going back to his biography, he makes losses appear as wins. He adopts a message, he makes it his own. It's those kind of things. So the opposition also suggests some trouble finding his own original brand. I know he's put his brand on everything. He's put his brand on steaks, wine, watches, you name it. You can put the Trump name on as much things as you like. That doesn't make it original, okay? So the originality is opposing that moon, which represents the things that his mother taught him in life. All right, so going back to his ascendant and midheaven, we're going to look at the Pluto alignment. And that's also in the Leo ascendant here. Okay, and you can see that Pluto is largely unaspected. And what this means is I don't see any major aspects with planets that are tugging and pulling on it. I just see this little sextile going down to Neptune in retrograde at 5 degrees. Okay, Pluto is at a very weak 10 degrees. It has to do with power and regeneration. It also has to do with death and rebirth. This does not mean physical death and rebirth. It has more to do with death and rebirth of one's inner self being in the 12th house. Okay, so it has to do with like, not like I'm this person or I feel like this way one day and feel like this the other day. No, this is revolutionary change, transformational change within someone. This can have to do with things that are hidden, shadow aspects of oneself. So, with this placement in Leo, which is a very extroverted and strong, fiery energy, we can see that there is a shift in Trump's outer personality, even with it residing in this 12th house, which is a little bit more introverted. Okay. This might have to do with a change in his career. We know that he went from a businessman to a politician. So it suggests something hidden, a darker side of himself. This version of himself is even stronger when it's lying in the 12th house. The 12th house is ruled by Pluto, so that makes Pluto much stronger energy than that 10 degrees suggests. This can also involve some spiritual or religious link, things hidden or tucked away with his inner being. But with it being in his midheaven, I would say that that's more about trying to your outer personality and trying to reflect that outer personality into the world than it does have to do with the self. Okay, so we're going to look at this 12th house with this Mars in Leo. This is not conjunct with Pluto because they're just so far away from each other. But Mars also, like Leo, has a very fiery energy. It also suggests a drive to be noticed. It can create drama when it's mixed with that Leo as well. But the big thing about Mars is that it does things without looking back. Like it has no regrets, no remorse when it does things. It's almost like doing stuff without going back and checking if it's the right thing. You just keep going forward, and that doesn't matter. So it has to do with impulsiveness, it has to do with drive, it has to do with ambition. And this is an attitude that he possibly inherited from his father, since Mars is linked to the father. Maybe his father, or maybe Roy Cohn, the lawyer and fixer that was his mentor, because I know he was also a father figure to Trump, okay? But Trump is also a father. So this attitude is passed down in generations, and Trump has passed it down to his own children, especially Eric Trump, as we can see. Okay, so he might feel, or he might be legitimizing this as some spiritual path or a way to nurture oneself, but when it's actually in the midheaven, it has to do more with the outer appearance than it has to do with the self. Okay, let's look at his interception. All right, what an interception here is, if you look at his Cancer here in the 11th house, you can see the 11th house is pretty much swallowing Cancer within it because the lines of the 11th house are completely on the outside of Cancer. So when this happens, the sign within the house, it loses its energy or its value. And therefore, the house has no house cusp ruler that's sitting on that line there, the sign that begins the house, because you can see Mercury right here so far away there. It's just completely encapsulated in that house. So there's no house cusp ruler to give it the 11th house that significance that it usually would if it wasn't intercepted. So intercepted houses always have two houses that are intercepted that oppose each other. We got Cancer and we also have Capricorn and whatever planets are within. So any planets that are within these houses, like Venus, Saturn, and Mercury, as you see in Cancer, they can almost act like retrograde planets, except with delayed energies, but not necessarily introverted like retrograde planets are, just a little bit weaker energies than usual. It can also mean these planets can take on some darker qualities or even opposing qualities from the sign that they are in at the time. And this will make sense here in a second. So there's a lot here with this interception. We're going to look at Venus first here, okay? So it has to do with love and relationships. And Cancer has to do with this sort of cardinal emotional energy. So Cancers, they tend to be very emotional, but with that Venus, they love to do things for others. And that's how they validate themselves. Cancer is a water sign. Cardinal energy, again, it's something that it doesn't look back, it just keeps going on. But Cancer is also ruled by the moon, which also has to do with emotions and can involve the mother. And this might mean that he looks for qualities in his women that he also saw in his mother. So his mother was an immigrant. His two of his wives were also immigrants, Ivanka and Melania. His mother was involved in charitable things, so were Ivana and Melania. His mother gave his father lots of children. Donald also has lots of children. Venus in Cancer in the 11th house, which has to do with humanitarianism, collaboration, and friendships, plays a small role here. However, Venus is conjunct with Saturn, and they have blended energies because they're so close together. Saturn has to do with responsibility, it has to do with structure and limitations. So Trump may have felt some great responsibility when it came to his love life, but I'm more inclined to feel that his love life was more of a responsibility in regards to his public image rather than holding some personal value, especially since this alignment resides in his midheaven, which has to do with his public image. If it were the other way, these planets would appear at the bottom or to the right of his chart, which has more to do with his personal life. That's why I think it has to do with his public image. Another thing I wanted to throw in here, and this is purely speculation and controversial, is with Trump involved in the Epstein scandal, there might be a link between Venus and some collective efforts with this 11th house. So we know that Trump is not a humanitarian in the sense of the 11th house. So I'm just trying to, it's purely speculation, but it might have something to do with that. All right, so Venus sextiles Neptune, which may involve some hidden secrets. Neptune is in retrograde here, so it's a little bit of introverted energy. So if there's any hidden secrets, they're very well hidden deep inside. So they don't really come out. So we don't really see these hidden secrets that Trump might have, okay? But these hidden secrets, when it sextile with Venus like that, these secrets could have to do with something to do with his love life or something like that. Okay. Both Venus and Saturn are squared with Jupiter in retrograde, which has to do with a muted sense of growth, desire, and expansion. And this might suggest some struggle between some strong personal desires with Jupiter and a feeling to upkeep this public image of being a responsible husband or love partner. So it's all about image. And I just want to say this can take an emotional toll on the average person, but being an ascendant Leo and maintaining a public image for Trump may be more important, especially with that Neptune there being in retrograde and being so hidden. There's also some pain with Chiron here when it's conjunct with Jupiter. They sort of blend their energies here. Chiron is the wounded healer in astrology, so it has to do with pain that needs to be healed or is already healed. So I'm thinking there is some magnified pain that Trump may have felt that can only be healed when it comes to making money, because the second house there has to do with someone's financial life and their possessions. So with this combo squaring with his love life with Venus, that tells me that he had some trouble holding on to relationships. It's true what they say. Even the rich know that money can't buy love. The appearance of love in this aspect might be having someone loyal that does better acting as arm candy than someone that can bring true meaning into someone's life. And this importance is also reflected in Mercury, because Jupiter and Chiron also square with Mercury at 8 degrees. Mercury is not a strong energy at 8 degrees, but it still really holds a lot of significance when it comes to collaboration. Communication, represented by Mercury, is not Trump's strongest suit, and we can see that with the 8 degrees. But he does have the capacity to work well with others in that 11th house, but he just doesn't communicate this well. And when it comes to working with others, the communication is just lacking. And that could be because he doesn't really see people as equals. He sees himself bigger than everybody else. Mercury is also squared with Jupiter. So let's talk about Jupiter again for a little bit. Jupiter is in retrograde, which suggests a muted or weakened energy, and being conjunct with Chiron, it suggests there's some pain that needs healing. Jupiter is about growth and expansion, but it also has to do with luck and fortune. But it's weakened here with it being in retrograde, even at 17 degrees. Jupiter is in Libra, and Libra is all about balance and being fair-minded, but there is a tension between this energy and Mercury's communication aspect. So this may mean that he may feel that working with others, mostly as equals, inhibits his sense of personal growth, which also plays against his feeling of personal balance with that Libra. This has a tendency to make him the opposite of fair-minded, or the opposite of a collaborative person at times. And with Mercury in Cancer, this can also make him sometimes feel frustrated or overwhelmed that he's not getting this communication across because he's just not doing it in the right way, especially for someone who has a certain public image to maintain. These things just work against him. Okay, so with Jupiter in the second house, also having to do with bad luck and fortune when it comes to money, even if he was born into wealth and has the ability to make millions, these planets squaring each other show that having issues with collaboration and communication can wreak havoc on his financial life and his personal wealth. And we can see that with his uh, his difficulty with Trump University. We can see that with his lawsuits, especially against Jean E. Carroll, where he's had to pay at millions. So you can see that even if it makes just a little dent in his wallet, that it still has it still wreaks havoc on his financial life. All right, so the other part of this interception is in Capricorn in his fifth house. Even though there are no planets here, even if there are no energies to bring out what I would see as a more fun side of Trump with his fifth house, that Capricorn still has a little bit of significance. It's because This fifth house of fun and leisure encapsulates that Capricorn. That Capricorn has to do with being grounded and ambitious and driven and having purpose, just like Saturn. It's someone who gets things done and someone who really wants to outshine everyone. Some might argue that there is a leisurely side to Donald Trump. He plays golf, and that's pretty much as far as I know. Does he have any hobbies or leisurely things that he does outside of golf? Who, who knows? But I don't know of any outside talents or hobbies that he has. So his Capricorn energy is reflected more in his Saturn alignment in his 12th house or in the 11th house, which has to do with the public image and not leisure. So possibly any fun energy that he might have might be reflected here in Uranus and Gemini, but it is a rebellious energy that also has to do with drive and ambition and career mindedness. Uranus, I mean, he makes fun of people. What more can I say? That's not being fun and leisurely, that's just making fun. Has nothing to do with hobbies, talents, or skills. Especially when it opposes the South Node in his maternal fourth house. All right, so we're going to tie all these planets together because he has two wedges that I want to take a look at also. What a wedge is like an offset triangle, and the tip of the triangle points to planets that are where the energy has an outlet. Okay, so the first wedge is created by the moon here and Jupiter, and then his north node and Sun and Uranus, okay? And it is the Sun, the north node, and Uranus that acts as his outlet. So first looking at the moon, it sextiles Jupiter. Sextile is a harmonious aspect. They work together. His emotional moon is in Sagittarius. Sagittarius has to do with the pursuit of religion, higher education, travel, and the pursuit of higher endeavors. So as we stated before, this also has to do with his mother, who probably was the force behind Trump being something important, at least initially. It harmonizes well with Jupiter, that is the planet of growth, expansion, and luck. But Jupiter is in retrograde, so I would suspect that something in his life made this ability to grow and attract luck just a bit stunted. Therefore, there was some problems finding balance in regards to wealth and its financial opportunities in life, but I mean, he still found a way to be a billionaire, so Jupiter also trines with Uranus, the North Node, and the Sun, and this shows that much of Trump's original mercurial and core personality was linked to this imbalance in the financial house. Okay. And this creates the wedge that we see between Moon, Jupiter, and the bodies of the 10th house, all linking his maternal foundations, financial imbalance, and his public personality together. They all tug and pull on each other to make this personality that he is. The next wedge I want to look at has to do with Mars. It starts with Mars and the Moon and is trined together. You can see Moon and Mars here trying together. And this plays a significant role in shaping Trump into who he is today. So the Moon has to do with his mother and emotions pertaining to his inner self, and Mars has to do with the father, his career, and his outer image. So trine is a harmonious energy. We can see that his mother and father here are working together to form his personality. And we can also follow Mars here, which sextiles to his core personality with the bodies in the 10th house. And this is supposed to also be a harmonizing connection, not as strong as a trine, but it's still a harmonizing connection. But I find it funny that it's resulted in him having a dual personality rather than someone that is more of like, what you see is what you get. And that could possibly be because his Moon and Mars, even though it's a harmonious aspect, he's taking these two sides, his mother and father, and he's showing two different personalities. Okay, so on this chart, when it comes to opposing his moon, we can see this tension. We have a person that's someone that people can look up to. And then we have this person that seems ingenuine with this mother and father energy. Okay. All right. So we're going to look at these empty houses. And we're almost finished. So we're going to look at Pisces in the 7th house and 8th house. It's hugging these two houses right here. Pisces has to do with intuition and hidden matters, just like Neptune. The 7th house has to do with love, relationships, and marriage. And had this house had planets in it, I would say that Trump was a family man, someone who saw marriage as sacred. But we know through his Venus alignment that he sees marriage rather as a transaction than having personal value because it's in his midheaven. It has to do with his public image. There's also no personal transformation when it comes to partnerships or relationships in his 8th house or even his inner intuitive being. So most people will grow with the help of others in their life, but I see this power and transformation and a sense of spiritual being rather reflected in Trump's financial life and with an ambition, power, and drive pertaining to his public image and persona. Okay. So Aries in the 8th and 9th houses. Aries is about fiery energy and a drive to move forward, just like Mars. Had he had planets in the 8th and 9th houses, I would say that there might have been some great need to reform oneself or even exhibit some sexual desire, maybe in regards to a healthy relationship. So you have, I mean, most people, when they have these sexual desires, it's usually because they're trying to satisfy their partner, but this is not true with Trump. Um, and also with his 9th house there, he may have had the ability to build a successful business or partnership with someone else. However, Trump's chart puts him in another direction where there are issues with collaborative efforts. So this tells me that he's not a very sexual person. Even if he was involved in the Epstein stuff, okay, this is something different, but rather someone who would use sex and love as a way to exert power instead of having to do with loving someone else. Okay, finally, Taurus. Taurus hugs the 9th and 10th houses. Taurus means someone who is grounded and stable. Tauruses are very good money managers. They like fine things and they show it by caring for others. I do think that Trump does exhibit some of these qualities. He definitely has proven he likes finer things, especially if they're laced in gold. But he doesn't reflect all of this Taurus quality, okay? We know that Jupiter and Chiron conjunct in his 2nd house make it difficult for him to manage money. Even if he's a billionaire, a lot of that was inherited, okay? So even if growth and luck made him a billionaire, he still is not able to manage money as good as if he had planets in Taurus. Um, also, I wanted to mention his Neptune in retrograde in Libra. It shows that he has difficulties obtaining inner balance. And with most of his planets in his midheaven and cusping his ascendant, I would say that he's not a grounded person like Taurus, but more someone who is extroverted, loves the spotlight, and that most of his planets there reflect that. All right. So I will be doing some tarot reading on Donald Trump in another video that will give a little bit of a more predictive element to this video if you want to watch that video after this one. I will try to do a progressive chart on him as well so we can just look at these future possibilities. So look out for that. Also, some future videos that are coming soon to look out for. I want to do a tutor series, which will focus on like Henry VIII's relationships with 2 charts with his wives and his comparing each other. I'll do Elizabeth I and Mary I eventually. I want to do true crime, maybe something on Alex Murdaugh, and then some political stuff maybe on Netanyahu, Stalin, or Lenin. And if you notice right there on the wall there, I do have a history degree, so I'm going to be doing a history series. I love to incorporate history into my astrological charts, maybe George Washington, maybe Abe Lincoln. Also, please let me know if there's some public figures that you would like me to cover, either with astrology or tarot, it doesn't matter. Put those in the comments below. Also, I would like to invite you guys to check out my Facebook and my Patreon pages. I'm also on Blue Sky. All of those links are in my description for this channel. And to end this video, please go ahead and subscribe and give me a like so that I can grow. Thank you all.